podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. I'm pleased you can join us for what is going to be a fascinating episode. When I set up the idea of doing Humans of Speedway, as well as speaking to the big stars on the track and big names that you will know from Speedway already and getting to know their story, I also wanted to keep it open to be able to speak to some of the lesser known names, perhaps, people's voices or faces that you see around tracks, but you don't really know too much about their background, perhaps. And my next episode is all about one of those people who've dedicated their entire life to the sport in a few different ways. He is Roy Clarke. Now, Roy, as a youngster, had dreams of being a speedway rider, and as we'll discuss in a bit more detail, there were mental health issues that really prevented him from kicking on to a career on the track. But he was also involved in being a mechanic, helping out in the pits as a Spannerman for many of Newcastle's stars over the last 20 years or so. And more recently, he's turned his attention to entertaining on the centregreen, behind the mic of clubs like Redcar, Newcastle, Berwick, and some of the big Speedway GB meetings as well over the last few years. So certainly a voice you'll know, and you might recognise his face from the terraces as well. But he's got a fascinating story, a lifetime in Speedway, and it's my pleasure to welcome to Humans of Speedway, Mr. Roy Clarke.
Good evening, good evening, whatever time you're listening to this. But yeah, for the first time in a long time, I'm a little bit nervous, Ian.
Are you? Why?
I don't know. It's probably because it's the first podcast I've ever done. It's probably ideal for me because I've got the perfect face for radio. So I think it's the best way to go. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, you're no stranger to a microphone, and we'll talk more about your centregreen exploits, because people will know your voice even if they don't know your face. They'll probably have heard your voice if they've been to one of many tracks around the country. But first of all, let's start with you. And how did you find your way into Speedway initially? Because you've a brief potted history. You've had a go at being a rider. You've been a mechanic for various riders. You've been a centregreen announcer. You've done some team management. You've kind of done it all. But what was your first way in?
Yeah. First way in was in a carry cut. My mum and dad used to go to Newcastle every week, and I was born on the 10th of June, and probably the first meeting after that, I would be on the third and fourth turn at Newcastle, up in the old wood sheds there with my mum and dad.
Wow. And this would be is this the same Brough Park track as now, or a different one?
Same place, vastly different now to what it was then. It was a very good stadium back in the 60s, and in the 70s there was a big massive stand on the back straight where people could stand and also sit behind glass, which was a lot closer to the track than what the one was in the main straight. There was a grass bank on the second turn people could stand on. Around the third and fourth turn, there was a big, massive tote board on the third turn, but there was terracing in front of that. I can seem to remember a little snack bar also in the tote bar there. But then there was two large covered wooden stands around what would be the fourth turn, which is now sort of like an empty area where they park cars. But it was an excellent stadium back then. Unfortunately, like a lot of stadiums, it's sort of like gone to the wall a little bit.
Yeah, they often do seem to fade away, and I think obviously not far from Newcastle, of course, you would have had Sunderland as well back in the day, and that's still there as a dog track, but no longer a speedway track, but kind of a similar facility, I suppose, around that time.
Yeah. The only thing that's changed for Sunderland is the dog track is slightly moved out now. There used to be a covered area on the back straight at Sunderland where people used to stand. I can probably remember more meetings at Sunderland than what I can at Newcastle from the early days. My mum and dad used to go there all the time. Even went to away matches. I can remember as a tot going to Weymouth to watch Weymouth versus Sunderland, and it was at the old Rallypole Lane track. But the grass was that tall on the centre green. All I could see was the heads going down the back straight.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been a fascinating scene then, with so much speedway in, not just in the northeast, but in the north as a whole. That away trips didn't have to be overly that far sometimes, did they?
No, it's one thing we used to do every bank holiday. If my mum and dad didn't go, I would go down with my uncle Michael, who still very much in my life at the moment, who became my mechanic when I rode. But we used to go down to Halifax the Shea every bank holiday weekend to watch the Halifax Dukes against the Bellevue Aces. What a fantastic meeting they were. The Halifax track the Shea was a brilliant track to watch Speedway at.
Yeah, and that's where I was introduced a very similar fashion to you, I think, in the early days. In fact, my first meeting I attended was the 1977 U-Levy World Final in Sweden, and that was before I was born. So I don't remember much, but yeah. Well, apparently I think it was raining and quite wet, so I probably had as good a view as some of the riders.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I mean. With me is I was 40 before I actually got on an aeroplane, so I've never been abroad very much for Speedway. I did go to Ivan's last World Final at Katowice, winning six World Championship on the Warner Sports train. That was a very eventful trip, to say the least.
And why was it eventful?
Well, it was two sets of trains that were sort of like we got the train down to the ferry over to the continent, and then a train to Poland. Our train, for some reason, ran out of alcohol, and the other train that went, the buffet car went on fire, so they had no food at all on the train. But it was great times because you had supporters from every single track you could think of. We ended up sharing one of the carts with the Hull Vikings fans. So obviously us from Newcastle and the Hull fans got on really well.
And going to Poland around then must have been a different prospect to now, because obviously it would have still been behind the Iron Curtain then, wouldn't it?
Oh, it was very much so. All that I can remember, all the buildings, very grey-looking buildings, but they would all be daubed with big banners and red and white, obviously propaganda and things like this. We took a lot of old Speedway stars and T-shirts and jeans and things like this, and we were selling them out there. We had a little business going, me and my friend Fred Mitchell, and it got a bit lively at one point, and I think we panicked and sort of like ran off and left everything behind.
Better safe than sorry. Now, Roy, you did what so many young boys dream of doing when they've been and watched Speedway for so many years through their childhood, that you wanted to become a rider, and you actually did something about it. And you did become a rider eventually, but how did you get started on that journey of getting on a bike and taking Speedway seriously from that point of view?
When I was about 13 or 14, I started doing sort of like our version of Cycle Speedway. A group of friends of ours had a track in a field that my dad owned called Tinker's Turn up at Benton, if anybody knows that. And we had this grass track, but we used to pour water on the bends, so you could actually slide partially way around the bends. But then we discovered there was actually a proper Cycle Speedway club in Wallsend. And we went down and was shocked and stunned that they had proper bikes and everything, because we had just normal bikes with no brakes on and rental handlebars strapped into the bikes, the wrong size for the grips. So we used to put metal in, like nails and things like this, just so we could tighten them up. But and then that's where I turned. We did go to Cycle Speedway, myself, Fred Mitchell, his brother, and there was a large group of work. Took that up and had some great times doing Cycle Speedway, but it was far too energetic for me.
Yeah, it's hard work, Cycle Speedway, all that pedalling, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah. The gear ratio on them is you've got to pedal like mad to go like a short distance, but it's also very aggressive. There's a lot of, shall we say, contact in Cycle Speedway. If you've never seen it, I would say have a look for one of the clubs and go and have a look at it. It is really exciting to watch.
Yeah, where I grew up, which was in West Yorkshire, is a place called Heckmondwike, and they've got a Cycle Speedway track there. And I remember my dad took us along and dropped my BMX or whatever it would have been over the fence, and we sort of broke into the Cycle Speedway track, and it was a proper track that had been, fit for purpose and everything, because they have league racing there. And when you look now on YouTube and you see them racing, they are clattering into each other. And it's every man for himself.
Yeah, it is. It was. I can remember riding up at Edinburgh. There was two tracks at Edinburgh, and I can't remember which one it was. But I was sort of like number one for the B team. I never really got into the main team, and me and a young lad had a ride coming together, coming off the second turn, and I took him right up the bank and left him hanging on a metal fence. And to say he wasn't very happy with what I did to him was a bit of an understatement. But I think that was sort of like my idea that maybe I should try the motorized side of it.
And when did you get your first motorised speedway bike then?
I did it the right way, actually, as far as I was concerned. I hired a bike at Felton, at the Felton training track, which was very well run by Ken Marshall. Robin Dixon, Barry Dixon, people like that. Will Hunter, the late Will Hunter, who became a referee. And I hired a bike with all the gear, the leathers. All I had to do was supply a helmet and a pair of gloves. And I went up, and again, my friend Fred Mitchell, he went up with us and had a go. I think Fred spent more time on his backside than what I did. And I thought, I'm going to have another go. So I hired the bike again about a couple of months after that. And I went, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a go at this. There was only one problem. I couldn't drive. So I had to work out something regarding how to get my bike up there and everything like that. So I went out and bought my first bike, which was a 2-valve Jawa off Will Hunter. Took it home, painted up all the mud guards and everything, got a front fork cover off there. Barry Briggs. Barry Briggs had his spares down in Southampton, and got it all done up. And that would be 1980. And I sort of like potted round on that 2-valve for that season. Didn't really get anywhere that year. I think there was more guts than glory on my part, and so 1980 was like my first year racing.
And how did you? I mean, because obviously nowadays there are a lot of ways to get involved in speedway at any level, really, but to sort of learn how to slide a bike and those skills like that. I mean, where did you learn to do that kind of thing? Was it just learning yourself on a training track? Did somebody show you?
There was a light bulb came on in my head when Felton closed for the winter. My uncle and I and a lad called John Foley, who very rarely rode at Felton, and this will come apparent very soon. We went up to Druridge Bay up the Northumberland coast, and it's a massive sand area when the tide goes out, and no safety fence. So that gave us the confidence to go in faster. And as I got faster, I started sliding it more. And me and John used to race each other on the beach, and we would just knock 7 shades out of each other on the beach. I can remember one day I dived right under him in one turn, touched him, and he straightened up, and he just headed straight up the sand, up the beach like a madman. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I was up at Holy Island the other week, and the tide was out then, and I was wondering, does anybody come down here and ride a speedway bike? Because it is a massive expanse of sand around there.
Oh yeah, up at Scremiston, up at Berwick, they've run meetings on the beach up there, and also just during the winter. I think that's a long time ago though, but it used to be a big thing at one time up there.
So you got your bike, and sort of we're talking the 1980 or so, and you're obviously feeling that it's worth giving it a crack, and you've got a shot of getting into a team perhaps at some point. So you kept going.
Yeah. Well, I decided it through the winter of 80-81 to sort of like upgrade my bike. So I went from a single 2-valve Jawa to a Neil Street conversion. And actually bought that off Frank Coffred. I can't remember how I was put in touch with Frank, but went down to Middlesbrough, met up with Frank, who bought me 2-valve Jawa off us because he wanted that for Bobby Beaton, who was going to be riding in the Wembley Indoor. And Bobby wanted a full 2-valve bike because he thought it would go better on the indoor tracks as what the bigger 4-valves were. So we did a deal. He took the 2-valve off us. I took the Neil Street conversion off him. Took it home. The next weekend, my uncle and I went up to the beach at Druridge Bay, And I tried it out, and it was just so much easier for us to ride for some reason. I just took to it straight away. There was only one problem. The day was cut short because my uncle wanted to have a go at it. So I says, right, go on, have a go. And he jumped on it and rode straight into the sea.
Ah.
Yeah. So
Engine flooded.
the engine flooded. So that was back home, full strip down, and back again the next week.
Oh dear, the trials and tribulations. But you sold your original bike then to Bobby Beaton.
Yeah, yeah. Which was funny because back the 1984, I think it was. I could be wrong with that day. I actually spanned for Bobby for a few meetings at Newcastle and got to know him very well. So yeah, smashing bloke. Frank Offred is as well. Everybody goes on about how fearless Frank Offred was on track, and he was. His races with Jack Millen at Sunderland and at Middlesbrough are legendary because they would just go for each other for 4 laps every time they went out. But off the track, what a nice bloke he is.
You find that about a lot of the races, though. I mean, I think that's a thing throughout the whole of Speedway, isn't it? That you can have very, very hard races on the track, but off the track, absolute gentlemen.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's up at Felton, there was we were all friends, but there was the likes of myself, Steve Bain, Gary Riddell, who went on to ride for Newcastle, and a few others. We'd go out and race each other, and it was like it'd be a world final. We just at Felton on a Sunday afternoon practicing, but if we went out with each other, everybody wanted to beat each other. So it really brought you on that way.
And as you were coming through at Felton, what other names would you be riding alongside who were also trying to make their name in the sport as well at the same time?
As I just mentioned, young man Gary Riddell, I think he didn't go as far as he could have done. He rode half a dozen meetings for Newcastle, but I also rode against people like Phil Jeffries, Brett Saunders, who both them rode for Edinburgh. Phil Jeffries had a good career with Newcastle for a few years. We'd get Rod Hunter, who would come up, who was like Newcastle's #1. He would be a great help. He used to help us a lot with me engines also. Rod, he was a cracking lad. But a lot of lads used to come. Scott Lamb, loads of lads come down from Edinburgh, all over the place. Kevin Kay, who everybody will know now in the North East, is former promoter at Redcar and still very much involved there. He used to ride at the same time as myself.
It's a small world.
Oh, very small world, yeah. But a good world because everybody knows each other, everybody gets on with each other, and like I went to Scunthorpe on Sunday, and it was like a family reunion. Everywhere you turned, hello, hello, and obviously you've got to keep your social distancing.
Well, of course, yes, but you can keep your 2 meters and still say hi.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode, I'm joined by Roy Clarke, who's a well-known voice at Speedway tracks in the North East, on the centregreen at Redcar and Newcastle. Also been a mechanic. He's opened his homes to many riders who have needed a place to kip. We'll hear about that in just a bit, and plus his all-time 1 to 7 still to come. But back to your riding career, things were going fairly well in your early days, pretty promising. Maybe a career as a team rider was beckoning, but it didn't really get off the ground. And that all came down to mental problems, really, that weren't really spoken about. There was no support back in that time, and that really affected your career as a Speedway rider right from the off.
Yeah, 81 was a great year. I won the Felton pairs with James Ewan. I came third behind Phil Jeffries and Gary Riddell in the Felton Junior Championship. And in the winter, I decided to get rid of the 4-valve, the Neil Street 4-valve, and get a Westlake. And I think it was a big mistake because I never got the hang of it. It used to belong to Tony Boyle, who you may remember from Bradford days. He used to ride for the Bradford Northern, I think it was at the time. And I got that bike, and it just couldn't get away with it. I spent more time on my backside than what I did anything else. And the more I tried, the more I would fall off. And as the times went on, it got to a point where when I was getting on the bike, I was so stiff and shaking, and just my head wasn't there, and people are saying to you, oh, just go out and do it, pull yourself together, give yourself a shake. And, the more I've tried, the worse it got. So it came to an end one day when I had about 3 or 4 crashes, smashed 2 helmets. One belonged to me, and I think one belonged to my cousin. And I thought, no, that's it. Came home, swapped the bike for a Mark II Cortina, and sold the leathers I had to Harry Tate, and that was the end of my career. Never to ride again.
And so what was it specifically that was that mental block when it came to riding a speedway bike? Was it the fear of crashing because you'd had those few crashes, or was it something else?
Yeah, it was the fear of crashing, it was anxiety, it was, I was feeling physically sick at the time. I've learned since then, through problems I've had in my own life since then with anxiety, that what I was feeling then was more of a mental thing than anything else. And I think if I knew now what I knew then, I would probably have done something about it. Have had a break for a period, probably got some help. Had a good talk with someone, and maybe came back to Speedway. But mental health in them days, as very much as it is still now, I suppose, is like a something nobody talks about. If you mention it, there's a lot of people who'll back off from it, and not they don't acknowledge it as like an illness.
It is something that you've been campaigning on for quite a long time, for a number of years, isn't it? Mental health among speedway riders, and it's something that you're very keen to see change within the sport. Obviously, it can affect riders in small ways, but in the extreme circumstances, it can lead to tragedies as well, as we were well aware of earlier this year with a rider that you will have worked very closely with at Redcar, Danny Ayers. And we don't want more of those kind of tragedies in any sport, but particularly in Speedway.
Oh, yeah. I'll come on to Danny Ayers in a moment. Back in May 2018, I wrote an article for the Newcastle Match Day magazine about mental health, and I put in, my thoughts about, when I was writing. But I also then contacted like referees, the track doctors at Newcastle, the Speedway Control Bureau, Neil Vatcher, Paul Ackroyd at the Speedway Riders Benevolent Fund to see what they did regarding people suffering from mental health. Regarding the referees and the track doctors, there was nothing in place for them. There is now, and I'll come up to that in a second. But Paul Ackroyd of the Speedway Riders Benevolent Fund, got talked to him regarding that, and yeah, he does an awful lot of help behind the scenes for riders who suffer with mental health, and he's working with Danny Ayers as a partner to help her and their 2 kids. Neil Vatcher, just at the beginning of this year, did some seminars with track staff, Clarke and courses at all over the country. And Stephen Barton, who is a psychologist at Newcastle RVI, and he's a lecturer. I actually got in touch he got in touch with me from the article I did. I got him in touch with Neil Vatcher, and since then, Neil Vatcher, at the beginning of this year, has done a lot of lectures with track staff and everything like that for how to spot things, how to help people and things like this, which is a massive step.
No, good on you, Roy. It's not an easy thing to tackle, and it would be easy just to ignore it and let it go. But it is an important subject, and I think in Speedway, being a red-blooded, adrenaline-fueled sport, it's an awkward subject to bring up.
Yeah, it's everybody can see somebody who's got a broken wrist or a broken leg, or a sling on or something like that. But when you're suffering from mental health, very few people will be able to see, because everybody puts a face on, they put a mask on, and they live behind the mask, and it isn't until they get away from it, either get away from the speedway or get into their own home environment, that they take off their mask and they show their real self.
To hear that Speedway riders are, only humans might come as a surprise to some people, but, as you mentioned there, they have got stress and anxiety and maybe some low mood going on in their minds as they pull up to the tapes. What is it for a Speedway rider that causes the biggest stresses about the sport?
Well, obviously, it's very much you get paid for the amount of points you score. And if you're not scoring enough points, you're not getting paid enough. Plus, there's also, if you've been a rider or if you come to the end of the season, you've gone through from March to the end of October of an extremely busy time if you have not raced and you're cleaning bikes. And it's such an exciting time between them periods. And when you come to the end of October, basically, bang, you may go from everything to nothing. And if you've got nothing to do, your mind starts working overtime and you start making mountains out of molehills and things like that, and starting not to think so logically. So Speedway keeps your mind going, it keeps you interested. Um, I had problems a few years ago where it came to the end of the season and I had nothing to look forward to, and basically I lost the ability to talk. I couldn't come out the house. I couldn't drive to work. As soon as I came out the house, I started shaking. I started wanting to cry. Total anxiety and fear. Um, and thankfully, through psychologists, I got myself turned around after about 3 or 4 months. It just happened that just before I was due to go back to work, I actually broke my humerus on my left arm, so that put us off work for another 3 months. But I think that did us a little bit more good than anything else because it gave us a little bit more break to get myself back to normal, getting back to work.
As you've mentioned, Roy, mental health is something that can't be seen, and you never know what's going on inside what otherwise seems to be a happy personality, and that can be characterised particularly with Danny Ayers, who sadly passed away earlier this year, and a rider that you will have worked closely with at Redcar. You do the centregreen announcing there, and you'll have known very well.
He was, yeah. And what you can say about Danny Ayers, and I think everybody says it, is what a cracking bloke he was around Speedway. What a breath of fresh air. I used to call him Mr. Entertainment because he was. As soon as he came to the stadium, he had time for everybody. He would do interviews if you asked him. On track, he'd give 100% in every single race. I purchased the DVD that was done to raise funds for his family, the best of Danny Ayers, and it goes from the start of his career where he spent more time off the bike than on the bike, but you could see as he built up, and everybody will remember his race at the British final with Chris Harris.
Yeah, fantastic race that.
Oh, unbelievable! But what was even better still is how he got there. The semi-final at Redcar, and I think he got 10 points that day to get to the British final, and he went for it. It was his time, and he was getting to that British final. Whatever way he could do it, but he put in some brilliant racing that day, and we'll always remember Danny Ayers because of that one race in the British final, but I'll remember him for an awful lot more races and interviews.
Obviously a very outgoing personality, I imagine, in the interviews, but real case in point that you never really know what's going on under that perhaps more outgoing and happy exterior.
It had been documented in the past, and I think it was common knowledge that after his mum passed away, I think he struggled a bit, but nobody knew how bad it was. I think he kept it so well hidden when he was at Speedway because he loved his racing, and I actually had the privilege at the Ben Fund meeting at Scunthorpe this year to do the centregreen there, and I spoke to Danny's partner, his little girl, and his dad, and John Armstrong, the former rider at Mildenhall, about Danny on the centregreen. And you could tell just from the whole stadium that they were listening to every single word they said, and they're also trying to do a lot to get the message forward regarding mental health and things like this. But a wonderful family, and you know, Danny's memory will keep going on because we'll all remember him for his Speedway side.
Absolutely, and not least that British final moment that you mentioned just a few moments ago too.
Yeah, I think probably Chris Harris will, say to anybody now that he wished he actually came second in that race. But in a way, Danny's, even though he lost it on the last bend, but how he stopped on that bike, it was just pure will to win,
Yeah.
brute force and skill also. But how the crowd reacted to him was just unbelievable, absolutely fantastic.
And a great ride that really epitomises Danny Ayers for us to remember him by. If that last section we just talked about regarding mental health has resonated with you in any way, there is a place you can go to get further advice. If you'd like to talk to someone, it's important that you do so. That's the underlying message. Speak out, get some help if you need it. kindtoyourmind.org is one place you can go. That's from the NHS, and there's lots of things on there that you can do. There's ways you can get help online courses, and also numbers of people you can ring if you need to speak to someone in person as well. But please do that and don't suffer in silence. Now on Humans of Speedway, let's turn our attention with Roy Clarke to something else that he's offered the sport, and that's when riders come over here leaving behind their homelands, wherever that is in Europe, Sweden or Denmark, and they have to take up residency in the northeast. Quite a culture shock, I'm sure, but one place they can go and stay is Roy's.
I've been lucky enough to have, some really smashing people stop with us, when we get on to my dream meeting later on, a few of them are involved with that, but, people up in the northeast here at Newcastle will know that I've had people like Bjarne Pedersen, Kenneth Bier, Kelly Lawson stop with us at over different periods of time. But it was like a halfway house. It's sort of like a bed and breakfast for Speedway riders. Also, the Worrell lads used to stop here, James Greaves, anybody who needed somewhere to kip, just crashed at my house. Actually, I can remember when Phil Morris rode at Newcastle, and we had the end of season do. This was on a Saturday night, and we had everybody sort of like landed back at my house for a party, and Phil came back. Now Phil's teetotal, and he was up all night and then jumped in his van next morning and drove home. But he wasn't driving straight home because he was running the training school at Stoke Speedway on the Sunday on his way home.
Always on the ball is Phil.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I'll tell you what, it's paying off what he did, what he's done, also what Neil Vatter's done, because we have got some wonderful talent in this country at the moment, and hopefully once this COVID-19 clears up, or they find a way to get around it so everybody can get back to watch Speedway all over the country, we've got some phenomenal talent coming through.
Yeah, well, I spoke about this with Phil when we did the episode with him, but I know that he's particularly excited for Robert Lambert, who's kind of the first to sort of really come through and make it into the GPs as he has done. But I know that he's got his eye on a number of other youngsters that are coming through the ranks as well very quickly. Yes,
certainly. Just up in the northeast here, Berwick's got the likes of young Flinty, Leon Flint. Newcastle, I've got Archie Freeman, Danny Smith, both two 15-year-olds coming through. Archie, very impressive on Sunday at Scunthorpe, took some big scalps down there. And you've got down at sort of like Redcar, Elliot Kelly and Alex Goldsborough. And, that's just a few lads I can name, and I could probably keep going on, like Owen Booth, people like that, who are all coming through, like the 125s up to the 250s, to the 500s. And for the first time, I would say, in a lot of years, I'm thinking, we're going in the right direction with our youth policy in this country.
Yeah, and it's something that's not very very quick to fix. I think that's the thing, isn't it? It takes time, but things certainly seem to be going in very much in the right direction now.
Yeah, certainly, and tracks are given time for the kids as well now. Redcar's still running their training sessions. There's the small training track up at Duns, up at Berwick, which is just reopened, I believe. But obviously, when I rode, we had Felton up here, but at Newcastle on a Monday night, I would get one ride.
Yeah.
One ride only. Now you've got all the junior leagues and things like this, which is phenomenal.
When you had these riders staying around then, I think particularly Newcastle is quite a different city from a lot of the UK, because, I mean, it's a fabulous city, but, the people... very strong accented, perhaps from the Queen's English in say Swindon. What do they make of Newcastle when they come over from Sweden or Denmark or wherever they've come from? What do they make of the people?
Well, I think certainly with the Danes, we're very similar. Because if you look back in history, when the Danes came over, they sort of landed in the northeast here, and some of our words that we use, like Geordie words, like gan yem, it's like going home in Geordie. It's the same in Danish. Danish is for going home is gan yem.
It's not really.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've got to remember, when Bjarne Pedersen first came over, Bjarne could hardly speak English, so Bjarne ended up with very much a Geordie accent, but after the 2 years he left here. But great times. The problem was with the house as well. It's not the same deco as what it is now, because I hadn't been moved in long, and the previous person who had my house was a young lady, and everything was pink. So this house got known as the Pink Palace for a lot of years. It's I think we've got very much the same sort of like mentality as well. Sort of like very friendly and things like this. So
yeah.
we got on great. When Kenneth BS stopped at my house, I wouldn't just have Kenneth for some weekends. Lassa would be here as well. Who's Lassa was only about 5 or 6 at the time when he came over to stop. I'd have his dad Ivan stop in here. Kenny Lawson's dad used to stop here quite a few times, and which was quite funny, because would have Peter and I would have a little drink in the house, and there was one morning Kenny came downstairs, and he came running back upstairs. He says, "Roy, you've got to come down and see me dad." And came downstairs, and his dad was lying on my settee, and he was cuddling me Dyson vacuum cleaner. so we called him Dyson from then onwards.
It all happens at the Pink Palace.
It all happens at the Pink Palace, yeah. And these are the stories I can't tell you. There's a lot I can't tell you.
Yeah, well, that's right. We want to protect the names of the of the innocent and the guilty.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, exciting. It must have been good though, because for the riders finding somewhere to stay. I mean, I guess some of them around the country would find, maybe a B&B to live at or whatever, or some kind of guest house. But to share a house with somebody who's involved in the sport and actually knows a little bit about, speedway bikes, engines, track craft and all that kind of stuff must have been, good for both of you, really, to be able to enjoy conversations like that.
Yeah, it was. I've also got a large collection of videos and DVDs of different tracks all over the country. So it was a common place for them to sit and watch a meeting before they'd go to an away track, just to see what the track was like.
Ah.
So they weren't going in sort of like totally blind. Mind you, I think I regretted it when I showed a couple of the riders meetings from Exeter when they said, "Oh, that's big, that's bumpy." I says, "Wait till you see the safety fence, it's steel."
Yes. Yeah, old school safety fence. So, and you were a mechanic for some of these riders as well?
Yeah, I've spanned for a lot of riders. I didn't particularly spanner for Bjarne and Kenneth, even though they lived with me, because at the time I was mechanic for Jesper Olsen, who was captain of Newcastle, another Dane, who's actually just recently moved back to Denmark. Him and his wife and his daughters have moved back to Denmark. Up till recently, he's been living at Bedlington, just up the road from here. And me and him have kept in touch. We were known as the old rockers by his wife, because we used to go out to gigs and have a blooming good time listening to music.
Why
But
not?
yeah, but no, I've had sort of like my dream team is it's not a who's who, but it's names of riders that I've mechanic for. I have When I've gone for the dream team, I haven't decided to go for like the world champions at Newcastle, because it would be easy for us to go for Ivan, Ollie, and
Yeah.
as Nicky. I've stuck with riders I've actually spanned for, but I can't fit all of them in, because I've spanned people like Stephen Mel, Scott Smith over my period of times, but
Okay.
a lot of good lads I've spanned for as well.
Well, what we'll do is we'll come to that in a moment. Your Speedway Paradise. We'll do that. I just want to touch now on your centregreen antics, because
Oh yeah.
a lot of people will know you. I mean, you've actually done the centregreen announcing for one of the only Speedway meetings to happen. Certainly, the only top level Speedway meeting to happen in Britain so far, at least in 2020, with the Ben Fun meeting. So. How did you get involved in grabbing the mic and heading out there onto the centre green? Because it is a role that, it must be fairly nerve-wracking to head out there and speaking to people is, it isn't easy doing this kind of thing. I will say from my own experience, I find, this very, very easy. Being on the radio, very, very easy, because you don't really have any knowledge of how many people are listening or anything like that. But when you're actually physically stood in front of people, I think that's much more of a much more difficult job.
Yeah, at first it was, and it was very much by accident that I sort of like stumbled into it. I think it was 2013. I was mechanicing for Stevie Worrell, and Stevie was going through a tough time at reserve at Newcastle, and decided to step down. And I'd already decided that Steve was going to be the last rider I was going to mechanic for, through problems with my hands and things like this. So George English and Steve Brock, the photographer at Newcastle, came up to us and went, "Do you fancy doing the centre green?" Because they had a gentleman at the time. I think he ran the quiz at a local pub. Wasn't a Speedway fan, but he was doing a good job. But he didn't know Speedway, if you know what I mean. And I just went, "Well, yeah, I'll give it a go. Let's see how it goes." And I sort of like did it, and I've put my own stamp on it. I think I'm a bit like Marmite with some fans. They either love us or they hate us. Because I gave each rider a nickname. At Newcastle and up at Berwick, every rider had their own theme tune. Um, so what I did was I looked at like announcers from the past and the ones now, the likes of Porky, Dick Barry, uh, Dennis McCleary up at Berwick, Peter York, who have done the centre greens in the past for years and years, and so like took little bits from each of them, and then also stuff from other sports. I was seeing what people were doing at other things like boxing, the WWE wrestling. I took a lot of sort of like ideas from that, and sort of like chucked it in the melting pot and see what came of it.
Yeah, and you make it your own as well. I think your accent in itself gives you your own sound anyway. So it doesn't sound like you're ripping people off or in any way. I mean, it's okay to be influenced by those that have gone before. I mean, I think your trademark is maybe the nicknames for the various riders.
Yeah, yeah. Some of them I stumble on. Some of them are like a light bulb moment, and but it's more for the kids, because the kids love it. At Newcastle, the kids used to love it saying Super Stevie Worrell.
Yeah.
And then get behind it. I've had some daft ones, like the Lean Mean Racing Machine, Andrew Tully. That was the one I enjoyed. I did have a nickname for him prior. We can't say what it is at the time, because I named him after a group of friends that he had, and I then found out what it meant, what I was saying, and I went, "Oh my God, I can't say that again."
I'm trying to think of the ones that I remember from that you're saying. The B-52, who was that?
Oh, that's Anderson. Yeah, known
Yeah.
as B-52 Anderson. Yeah. There was also um, Ben Barker, Ben Barker, the $6 million skipper.
Wasn't the one for Ashley Morris as well? I seem to remember.
Yes,
Is that him?
the Black Country Blaster. Yeah, yeah. But he kept coming up to us going, "Oh no, it's from the Black Country." Well, you sound like you're from the Black Country. That'll do for me.
Yeah, it's all good stuff, and I think we do talk about presentation and things like that at Speedway meetings, and it's something we touched on with Phil Morris, because obviously the Grand Prix are probably the slickest of all meetings that you'll ever see, but not every meeting is like that. But I think with a bit of personality like yourself sort of offers, then it does make a difference to the experience for everybody. I'd say particularly for families and so on.
Well, that's it. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think Speedway is being pushed the wrong way these days. We've always said it's a family sport. Yes, it is a family sport. Any age can go, but I think we're losing a big chunk of like kids between 20, 25, 30. Because if you look at the age range that go to Speedway, it's either very young kids or it's people of a slightly older age. But I think if we could get into the 20-year-olds and that would bring the sport even more forward. I'd love to do some extreme stuff like on the centregreens, but it's doing it. There's two gentlemen who are wrestlers for the WWE UK NXT, who are both massive Speedway fans. A lad called Jay Melrose, who actually wrestles as the Primate, did second halves at Newcastle back in the mid 2005, 2006, and stopped riding because he broke his arm at Scunthorpe. But he's now big with the WWE. Dave Mastiff, who actually wrestles with Cradley Heath's emblem on his knee pads. He's a massive Speedway fan. I've always wanted to put a wrestling ring at the front of the terrace, and they come out to have a 15-minute fight, and at the end of that, say it's going to be a 1-all draw. Right, well, now get in right. There's only one way to decide it. At the interval in this meeting tonight, used to match race on a Speedway bike. Then the lads will do it. They would love to do it. I've spoke to both of them regarding it. They would love to do it.
That would be really good. Mixing wrestling and Speedway together seamlessly.
Yeah, and the thing is, why hasn't anybody tried to get Guy Martin up against John McGuinness for a match race? John McGuinness has got a Speedway break. Guy Martin will do anything.
Maybe there's a Channel 4 programme in that.
Oh, I think there certainly is. We'll put it forward to them.
Yeah, me and you, let's get down Channel 4. They're only in Leeds these days. Let's crack on.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we'll have to go down different avenues and different ways of the presenting side. Redcar, I love doing Redcar because I've got Smoggy the Bear to work with and Keith McGee up in the box, and you're very close to the fans there.
Mm-hmm.
But Smoggy's trainer Samantha is a trained dancer and great entertainer, and me and her work really well together. This fat lad can bust a few moves every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I know that you you do work very hard, and you do work hard on entertaining the crowd. And there are those lulls in any meeting during track grades, or they're replacing a piece of the air fence or whatever that maybe takes 15, 20 minutes or so. And you have to have a few tricks up your sleeve, don't you? And I think it's keeping the audience sort of engaged, isn't it, through that time?
Well, that's it. Yeah. I was trying to remember what year it was. Back in 2016, I did the Fours weekend at Peterborough, which was 5 meetings in 2 days. It was there was three full semi-finals on the Saturday, then there was an individual meeting on the Sunday, and then the final of the Fours that afternoon, and it was just finding different things for us to do. I was going into the crowd. I was, interviewing people. I actually managed to get some people onto the centregreen as well to watch races. But one of the funniest things was at the individual meeting on the Sunday, we had four young ladies doing the start gate, and I just said to them, I says, if anybody just wants to nip off for a little break, I'll take over for you. And I went, all right. And it just happened that the young lady that was in blue decided she wanted to nip off. So I'd watched what they were doing regarding the routine at the start. So I went out and did the routine with them exactly, which went down well with the fans. But what was even better was the rider that was pulling into gate two was Richie Worrell, who I obviously I used to mechanic for also. And Richie just looked at us and just shook his head and just went, and I went, well, Richie Worrell knows me, so he's used to this. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, you're showing all sides of your skill set there.
Oh well, there was one point I was threatening. I was talking to the lad who was driving the tractor, watering the track, because it was such a hot day. I says, if I lie down on the track, can you drive over us so I can get sprayed by the water tanker? But health and safety played its part in that one. It didn't happen.
It always does, doesn't it? It's always the health and safety spoiling the fun.
Yeah, but if they don't know, they don't find out.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. My guest in this episode is Roy Clarke, a well-known figure in Speedway, particularly in the Northeast. And you might have heard his voice at a number of meetings, both across the country, but particularly at Redcar and Newcastle and Berwick as well over the last few years or so. And right now, it's time for him to design his own dream Speedway meeting in our little feature called Speedway Paradise. Who's going to be in Roy's all-time 1 to 7? Which track is he going to choose? Which rules are he going to change? We're about to find out. So, Roy, over to you. We're designing your meeting. First of all, we need to know which track you are going to choose as your all-time favourite track, purely for racing on.
I've listened to a few of these podcasts, and I agree with a lot of people, about the new Bellevue, Hyde Road, obviously Redcar, brilliant racetrack, but because of the meeting I'm putting on, the track shale and the track shape that I want is Newcastle's Brough Park from 2005. For some reason that year, the racing was brilliant. There was passing inside and outside most meetings, and it was great entertainment. So track shape and the shale, 2005 Newcastle Brough Park.
Tell us about Brough Park and what it's like to ride on it, because it is quite a technical track, isn't it, as they go? I think a lot of teams sort of struggle there as the away side, because it's one of those where you do have to slow down for the corners. It's not a full wind-it-on job, is it?
It is. It's a thinking riders track. They're very long straights and very tight turns. The track's rather narrow, even though it's actually been widened both on both bends and on the straights, but it is still very narrow. But you've got to use your brain to race around there. Everybody says, "Oh, it's too much of a gators track," but it isn't. If you watch the racing from that year, and actually the Edinburgh match from Newcastle last year, which was the Knockout Cup, Josh Pickering for Edinburgh came from 15 metres back to win Heat 14. In one of the most phenomenal rides I've ever seen at Newcastle. But it is a very, very technical track. And as Ivan Major once said, if you can ride Newcastle, you can ride anywhere.
Yeah, it didn't do him any harm, did it?
No, he won a few things in his time, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's look at the stadium that you would put that track in then.
This is going to surprise a lot of people, but I'm going to go for Wimbledon.
Okay.
Sadly lost to All Sports last year, but I can remember going down as a child to watch individual meetings like the Laurels, then going later on for the National League Riders Championship and things like that. And I always thought that stadium produced a fabulous atmosphere. It was, I can remember, there's a lot of wooden area, plastic seating. You could sit in behind the glass if you wanted to, but a lot of it was very much open, covered all round, and the atmosphere just seemed to be absolutely phenomenal.
Okay, so the Brough Park track in Wimbledon's stadium. And now we move on to the big question, which I think is the one that fascinates the most people. You're 1 to 7, and now you've said that your 1 to 7 that you are picking here are all riders that you have been a mechanic for, a Spannerman for.
Yeah, there is, and apologies to any rider who I've spanned for that I don't mention in this. It's not because I didn't enjoy it, because I enjoyed riding Spannerman for everybody. It's just that these lads sort of like stick out my mind. And the first one at number 1 is a gentleman we've mentioned already, Bjarne Pedersen. Newcastle 2000 and 2001, won the championship in 2001. Brilliant lad, very, very professional. I've seen him sit in my house at the kitchen table, and he'd be designing stuff for next season. While that season was still going ahead, he's so organised, so unbelievable. You know, great lad, and thankfully, I think he's going to do one more year. He was due to retire this year, but he is going to do one more year. He was going to come over for Newcastle's 90th anniversary meeting. I'd spoke to him regarding that, and a deal had been done with the Newcastle promotion, so he was coming over for that. And hopefully next year, if he doesn't fancy riding in Poland, maybe let's have one more season out of Bjarne Pedersen in the UK. That would be fantastic as far as I'm concerned.
That would be nice, because he's had a cracking career, hasn't he? He's been in the Grand Prix and ridden for his country, and he's done everything.
Yeah. I was lucky to spend some time with the Danish national team when the World Team Cup was held at Peterborough. The likes of Nicky, Bjarne, Kenneth Bier, people like that. Great bunch of people.
Okay, so who's at number 2 then, behind Bjarne?
The young man who took over Bjarne's mantle as number 1 at Newcastle, Kenneth Bier, 2002, 2003. KB, phenomenal little rider. Used to love it, really, really deep at Newcastle, and he would just get his bike out in the dirt on the outside and just blast around. Very, very spectacular little rider, and I think he would have went on a lot further in the sport. I think he could have easily have picked up a world championship if he hadn't had the couple of injuries he's had. He's done the business as Danish champion and things like this, and done it on the world stage. But I think he could have won a world championship at least once if he hadn't picked up the injuries.
Yeah, I mean, injuries obviously a permanent hazard in Speedway, aren't they? But they come at the wrong time, and they can really sort of inhibit your performance. And I guess in his case, it cost him really, position in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, exactly. It did. Yes, but still going strong, and hopefully we'll get him back over in this country to ride in this country. But still doing the business in Poland, and it's still great to watch. Still a very good rider indeed.
Okay then, so Bjarne Pedersen, Kenneth Bier, big on the Danes. Who's next?
Yeah, 3 in a row. 3 Danes in a row. Kenny Larson.
Yeah.
Tragic that his Speedway career was cut short by a freak accident. I was lucky enough to spanner for Kenny in 2010. Kenny actually lived with us here that year also, and Kenny won the Premier League Riders' Championship at Sheffield, which was brilliant. His dad and his Danish mechanic was over that weekend, and but Kenny said to them, "Listen, Roy's been with us all season in England. It's me and Roy in the pits today. You can go up into the bar and have a drink." So it was a great day, a great season, because he's such a funny character. You never know what he's going to do. He's and you can't get mad with him. I can remember I was out one night. Actually, he took us up to a pub up in Killingworth, just outside Newcastle, and I was having a couple of beers up there with Bob Boardman, who works at Newcastle, and a couple of others. And Kenny went, "I've got to go home. I've got to get myself ready for Sunday." This was Friday night, right? So come back home later, and as I walk into my street, my front doors are open, all my lights are on, and I'm going, "What's going on here?" There was no van in the drive, so I come in the house. "Kenny, where are you?" "Nowhere." So I rang him up. "Kenny, where are you?" "I'm at Alec." "You're at Alec?" I says, "You've left the house open." He went, "Oh, I haven't, have I?" I says, "I've left all the lights on the house open, the front door's wide open." Yeah, so he got distracted and just dived in the van and went straight up to Alec.
Yeah, and for those not sure the distances, I mean, that's like a good 20, 30 miles away.
Yeah, 30 miles, yeah, it is. But I couldn't, you kind of stop angry with him, because he's just such a lovely lad. And he came over, was it last year? It must have been last year, because Archie Freeman was doing very well in the 150cc class of the British Youth Championship, and the final was held at Newcastle, and we actually got Kenny to come over for when Archie won. Thankfully he did win, so Kenny Larson presented Archie with the trophy, because Kenny was Archie's hero.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. So Kenny Larson then. Who at number 4? Is it 4 Danes in a row?
No, it's not, but I'm going to cheat.
Go on.
Can I cheat?
Well, go on, Roy, as it's you.
Yeah. And it'll work out, you'll know why in a second.
All right.
Richie Steve Worrell.
Right, okay. So it's
It's the twins.
A Worrell hybrid.
The Worrell hybrid. Because Richie, the flamboyant brother, hard riding, Steve, the more, I would say, Lee Adams type rider, the smooth, controlled, both excellent riders, both superb number ones. I had some great times with them. I can remember when they were still riding in the National League for the Sheffield and Scunthorpe National League team. We went to the National League pairs at Newport, and they did nothing but bicker all through the meeting. But by gum, when they're on the track and the riders a pair, they were phenomenal. It was pure telepathy between the two of them. A great family. When I used to go down there and stop over for the weekend, they had one of these big, massive motorhomes that you used to use when they were doing the motocross, and I used to sleep in that. But it was bigger than my house.
You don't see Speedway riders with motorhomes anymore so much.
No, it didn't even my days. My uncle had a Maxi, and we had my bike on the back of the Maxi. Saying that, Kenneth Bier had a hybrid, high top, long wheelbase transit van, which we used to call the ice cream van. But we had some great times with that. Kenneth used to get bored on away trips, and you'd be driving down the M1, and all of a sudden you would get a bottle of freezing cold water just poured straight over the top of you.
Well, it spices up the journey, Roy.
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah. There's been some strange old journeys in my time.
Number 5, then. Who's going there in that position?
Yeah, number 5 and captain is my fellow old rocker Jesper Olsen.
Oh, yeah.
I had 5 years with Jesper, 4 at Newcastle, 4 and a bit at Newcastle, and like half a season at Bellevue with him, and had some great times. Our musical taste is more or less exactly the same, and we would just sit in the van, crank the music up. Jesper would take his shoes off, put his feet on the dashboard, and he'd just chill out, and would just be driving down the road, listening to rock music all the way.
It's like sort of paint a picture of was it like Bill and Ted or something like that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Bjorn Pedersen once travelled with us, and we decided to have a Kate Bush day, so we drove all the way from Newcastle to Lakeside with Kate Bush on. Poor old Bjorn his head was done in by the time we got down there.
Yeah, I think probably most people's head would be done in by Middlesbrough, to be honest, travelling down with Kate Bush on. But anyway, it was one way to prepare.
Yeah.
One thing that we have talked about in previous episodes, I think particularly it was the Neil Machin one when he was mechanic for Rob Woofenden. Is sort of what a close relationship that mechanics have with the riders. You know, when you are the regular Spannerman and you go into all of the meetings and stuff, it is a close partnership between the two of you, isn't it? I mean, obviously the rider goes out and gets the points on the night, but you are a crucial part of the whole thing, not least choosing the tunes in the car.
Yeah, you get to know how each other think. You'll watch a rider go out and see the ride he's had, and you'd listen to the engine to hear if it was revving going too much going down the straight, different things like this. But what I used to do is obviously listen to what the rider says. I would never say do this, do that. I would only do that if they said to me, "Do you think I should do this?" Yeah, but you get to know how each other think anyhow, and you certainly have a riders coming in, and the last gentleman on my team, we very much had that. He would come in after a race, and I'd either point my finger up and go up one or down one or shorten the wheelbase, and things like that. You just got to know how each other think, and it does become a real bond between you.
And is there a sort of a magic trick that you had up your sleeve that more often than not worked in sort of sorting a bike out, or was it just sort of like you say, keeping an eye on specifics for each track?
Oh yeah, you have little routines with all riders. It's one we're talking about Jesper Olsen. Jesper had real problems with the shoulder for a lot of his career at Newcastle. It kept popping out. I've been lying in bed one at night, and the phone would go, and it'd be Jesper's wife, Carol, saying, "Can you do us a favour? Can you come up and pick him up and take him to hospital? His shoulder's popped out when he's rolled over in bed." It was that bad at times. But if Jesper did fall off, I used to know whether he was injured or whether he was okay by just the way he lay on the ground. We had a routine where if he just stopped still and he was lay flat on his stomach, I would just pick the bike up, go straight back to the pits and deal with the bike. I'd have no worries about him at all because I knew he was okay.
Does that buy you extra time to get the bike ready?
Yeah. Little tricks like that, or as you walk past the team manager, certainly with George English, George, get on the phone to the ref, cause mayhem, get some time, or get the tractor out, get the track grade or something like that, just to give a little bit extra time.
I think we saw that in the Grand Prix at the weekend, didn't we? With Ty Woofenden, he sort of made sure he had a full check over before getting up. But funnily enough, his bike was ready for him to get straight back on.
Yes, yeah. And if the bike, I used to signal to the pits if the bike I picked up was bent in some way that it wasn't going to be available for the rerun, is to point to the second bike and say, right, can somebody crank that up and get that started? So when I come in, I just put the bent bike on the stand. I would concentrate on taking the back wheel out of that bike, ready to go into the second bike. Once that was warmed up, put the wheel bin to that bike, so it was ready for the rider to go out.
See all these things going on while you're supping on your Bovril and munching your pie.
Yeah. I think one of the worst things that a mechanic has to do, and I don't know a mechanic who actually enjoys doing it, is he's got to put a rear tyre on at the meeting. You can't put it on beforehand. So, every now and then you'll hear somebody go, "Oh no," and you'll shout over, "Oh, Jack the Nipper's here," and the tube's gone.
Oh dear! Right, okay. We've got two more riders in your team then. Who are your 6 and your 7?
Yeah, number 6, I'm going to go with Trent Leverington, Australian rider who rode for Newcastle in 2009. Had not a good year at his standards that year, but I just got on so well with him. Used to enjoy travelling around with him. His engine tuner was Trevor Hedge, the former Norwich rider and England international, and there was quite a few times we had to load the bike up and take the engine down to Trevor Hedge in Norwich, and spent a lot of time in the van pottering around. But Trent was great to work with, such a lovely lad. deserved a better run at Newcastle. I don't think the fans saw the best of him at the beginning of the season. At the end of the season, he was starting to fly again, but only did the one year at Newcastle. But made a name for himself because he was prone to doing a wheelie after a race if he'd won a race, and there was one particular meeting. I think it was against Ipswich later on in the year, and they'd got a 5. Newcastle had got a 5-1, and Trent decided to do the wheelie where he stood on the push bar, and the bike was more or less vertical going down the home straight. Unfortunately, he went over the back, so he made himself look a right idiot. But he just turned to the crowd and gave them a big bow, and got the biggest cheer of the night. But a lovely lad.
It's how you style them out, isn't it? And your last position then, number 7.
Yeah, and anybody who knows me will know who this is going to be, and it's James Greaves. I did 4 seasons with James, 2 at Newcastle, and followed him down to Redcar and did 2 seasons for him down there. Had a great time, had some great laughs with him down there. His first year at Newcastle, Stuart Dixon, who's the current co-promoter at Leicester and team manager, when James said, "Oh, I'm going to Newcastle," Stuart Dixon said, "I don't know why you're going there. You can't overtake on that track. It's impossible to." But James was just phenomenal. If he did miss the gate, he would pass anybody around the outside, up the inside. Some of his outside passes was just phenomenal, and a great lad to work with. And it happened it wasn't by mistake, but it was a chance meeting in the bar on press day after it finished, because James and Jesper Olsen, who I was previously mechanic for, sort of like, even though the team partners up at Glasgow, whenever they raced against each other at Newcastle, something would happen, and either Jesper would come off or James would come off. So they never really got on well. And with me being with Jesper, I sort of like thought James was a bit of a dodgy character, to say the least. But I remember one meeting when James and Jesper tangled, and James is storming back to the pits, going across the centre green, and I'm pushing the bike back, and I'm thinking, what's all the cheering for? And I looked over, and coming down from the pits gate was Jesper's wife, Carol Olsen, and you don't pick on Carol. And I'm thinking, Jesper, don't pick on her. She'll knock you out. The biggest cheer of the night was Carol Olsen chasing James Greaves across the centre green. It was great days.
Sort of as visions of a scene from Last of the Summer Wine, almost.
Oh, certainly, yeah. But getting back to that first season that James had at Newcastle, he scored 11 home maximums that year.
Wow.
He was that phenomenal. Yeah. There was one race against Newport, and it's by far my favourite race of all time. He was partnered with Trevor Harden, and I think he was up against Mads Corneliusson and Tony Atkin. And James was on gate 2, and he totally missed the gate. He was stone last. By the third lap, he was in the lead, but he did it all the hard way. He went round 2 riders round the third and fourth bend round the outside of them. Trevor Harden was going round the outside of Tony Atkin, and James went around the outside of Trevor Harden. Just a phenomenal piece of class, absolute genius on a speedway bike.
And if people haven't seen that race, so share it on our social media as well. So have a look on Facebook or Twitter at Speedway Humans on Twitter, and just search for Humans of Speedway on Facebook, and you'll be able to see that race that Roy is talking about there.
There's also a funny story about James that whenever he used to go to Sheffield, because Sheffield's a big fast track, like a big oval,
yeah,
he would never do very well. And he went with Redcar one year. I think it was the first year he was there, and Gary Havelock was injured at the time, and Chris Van Straten, who's involved with Redcar but is more known for his Wolverhampton promotion, they were at Sheffield, and Javi and CVS were talking, and CVS is going, "Oh, if we'll get hammered today, James hates this place." And Javi goes, "He'll score double figures today." CVS is going, no way, no way. So they had a little flutter between them. So Gary Havelock did the track walk with James, came back in. I think he got third in his first one, but he won his next two. He won a tactical ride and got 6 points, and ended up with something like 14 points. And I looked at the Speedway updates yesterday regarding this, and somebody put on the updates there saying James Greaves has scored more points in this meeting than what he has done in all his previous appearances put together. But it was just hilarious. He couldn't do a thing wrong. He was partnered with German Robbie Kessler, who was an ex-Sheffield Raider. And Brian Havelock says to James, follow Robbie round. He'll pull you round. He'll show you how to go. And come in, and James had won the race. Robbie Kessler was second. And Robbie Kessler comes back in and goes to Brian Havelock, excuse me, I'm having difficulty following him round. He's just too fast round here for me.
It's amazing what you can do when somebody tells you can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So great team there then, Roy, and all riders that you've spannered for. Who would be the referee for your meeting?
Well, sexiest referee in Speedway, Willie Dishington, or from Paisley, Scotland, or Graham Flint. Both cracking blokes. There's a lot of good referees. Peter Clarke, who I call our kid, obviously, because we share the same surname. But and loads of really good referees. I even get on well with Jim McGregor. You know, Jim McGregor's a cracking bloke, even though he pulled us into the box one day and told us off. But no, Willie Dishington for being the sexiest man. Graham Flint, by far the funniest referee. I can remember one night at Berwick where him and Steve Hayward, the announcer up there at the time, were laughing so much they couldn't put the 2-minute buzzer on, because I could just see them. And Flint is under the counter, and Steve Hayward's just, he's follically challenged, and all I can see is his bright red head in the box, and I'm going, what on earth are they playing at up there?
Well, the mind boggles. On the subject then of officialdom in Speedway, if you're going to change one rule, Roy, what would it be?
Well, I was going to ask you if you could slightly change the way you said that and put the word book into that. Which one rule book would you change?
Yes, well.
For me, put me centregreen head on, I think riders should be allowed to roll at the start, move at the start. Because if somebody gets a flyer, that's something else for me to play on, something to get the crowd going with. Or if somebody's constantly rolling at the start, you know, I can work on that and get the crowd going. You know, Ivan Major used to make an art of that, and everybody, if he were a away fan, he hated you. They hated him. But for the home fans, they loved him because you knew he was psyching the other riders out and that. And but yeah, I would change that.
And finally, then, a team from any time in history, a complete team to take yours on. Who would it be?
1976, Newcastle Diamonds, who won the League, Cup, and the Fours that year. Phenomenal team.
And would that be the one with Ivan in it?
No, Ivan had moved on there in 1976. It was the second year after Ian Thomas and Brian Lorna reopened Newcastle after they had been closed for 5 years. He put together a team in 75, which was basically, it more or less resembled one heat leader, 3 unknown Aussies, and 3 second strings. And it became a phenomenal team. 76, the team changed slightly halfway through, which I'll come on to during this. But the 7 riders I'm going to name all rode for Newcastle in that year. And, you know, historical names, you know, number 1, Tom Owen. You know, 10.5 point average that year. Number 2, a bit of a unsung hero, but was loved by the fans at Newcastle. That's Phil Michaelides. Only did 3 years in this country, but great little rider. Number 3, Joe Owen, who had a 11.5 average that year. I think he only dropped 3 points the whole season at Newcastle. Ron Henderson, a young Aussie lad. I think he was only 19 at the time when he retired.
Yeah.
massive loss to the sport. Went on to become a social worker and a paramedic, and now is very much involved with the church in Australia. Now, he could have gone on to be a world star. He was that good. 5, which are Newcastle fans might shout at the computer listening to this when I name this rider, Brian Havelock. Brian started off captain as Newcastle that year, but left halfway through to go to Workington and became Workington number 1 that year. But did a cracking job at Newcastle. Won the pairs with Tom Owen the previous year, but could never get away with the Newcastle track, so that's why he left. 6 is the man who actually replaced him at Newcastle, a young man called Andy Cusworth, who was riding for Halifax in the top league, and sort of like doubled up. It was, doubling up was even that early on, 1976. He was from Dewsbury. He'd rode at Newcastle previously for Stoke and always done very well, but he came to Newcastle. And number 7, another man who became a real legend at Newcastle, Robbie Blackadder.
Wow, that's a name and a half.
I know. In the early days, he was renowned for his crashes. Actually, lost part of his finger on the track at Newcastle. The first season, I think it was. And Robbie Best, the lad who was working on the track back then and still does now at Newcastle, actually found the part of his finger, so took it back to the pits, but they could never reattach it.
Dear.
Robbie Blackadder, after a few years in this country, became a real number 1 and a top rider for Newcastle. But phenomenal team back then, and me being a young lad then, it really sticks in my mind.
Well, it sounds like all the ingredients for the perfect meeting, Roy. Thanks for sharing that with us, and thanks for telling us your story as well, and some of your experiences too. It's been great.
Thanks very much, Ian, for inviting us on to the podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and to everybody out there, just talk to people, talk to anybody, get yourself down to the Speedway when it does restart, because I tell you what, we love it, don't we?
We do, and we hope to see you back on the centre green behind the mic again very, very soon.
I hope so. Thanks very much.
My pleasure to speak to Roy Clarke, and hopefully we'll see him back on the centre green at Redcar or Newcastle or Berwick or somewhere else in the UK. Who knows where he'll pop up next, but a fascinating story. And if you're a new subscriber to Humans of Speedway, first of all, welcome along. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed it. There are 8 other episodes that you can check out right now, including chats with Speedway Grand Prix race director Phil Morris. We've got Shane Parker going inside the referee's box with Chris Durno, and 7-time British champion Scott Nichols, and TV commentator Nigel Pearson. Just a few that you can check out right now wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you did enjoy listening, it'd be great for you to drop us a review and a rating wherever you listen to your podcast. That's always nice. And plus, you can catch us on social media. We are at Speedway Humans on Twitter and Humans of Speedway on Facebook. We'll always share a few little bonus clips there of upcoming episodes. You can find out all the latest news before it happens, quite often on those particular feeds. But until next time, stay safe, and we'll speak soon on Humans of Speedway.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.